So good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started so that we can stay on track. And actually, I was watching the news this morning, and there are going to be some storms. So those of us that have to catch flights might want to get out earlier. So depending on how we go through things, we want to have plenty of time for revisiting the big chunks of items that we talked about at this plenary, and have just an opportunity for everyone to share any comments, concerns, questions that they may have. And like I said last night, I started seeing some merging of topics, and I want to make sure that everybody understands the differences between the strategic plan and the framework development plan. They're two very important building blocks of our organization in terms of our work products and how we operate. However, they are very different items. So we're going to start this morning by asking Neville Pattinson to come back on stage and kind of just give a quick overview again of what the strategic plan is, not to go through a slide deck or anything to that extent, but then also to answer questions that you may have, and then to just listen to suggestions that you may have as well. There have been some interesting conversations about additional components of what our organization should be looking at from a financial standpoint. We want to hear all those things because we're going to have to start digging in deep now to make all of these things come to life. At this point, they are documents, and now we need to turn them into actionable components. So, Neville, do you mind coming back up? Thank you. And then again, we'll have a chance for people to sign in at the front desk. We're going to take a break before we start the functional model discussion and vote. And so we'll be able to allow people to sign in if they have not signed in, because again, we're trying to do a count to ensure we have quorum.
All right, good morning everybody, and everybody online as well. I'm going to pick up slide 2 just to let you revisit the purpose of strategic planning. It's an organization's process of defining its strategy, et cetera, et cetera. You can read the slide. What we're considering here is something which is holistic in terms of a complete organizational plan in terms of where we are today and where we need to be. So this is not just work items from the work groups and the committees. This is everything to do with that, plus the organization, how we're organized, what the resources we need, etc., what structure we need. So it encompasses the entire organization from many different aspects. So strategic planning in that respect, as you can see on the slide and read, is something which is really to do with the entire activities of the administration of the organization, the deliverables of the organization, and so forth. So let me find a next slide to pick up. Oop, that would be good. Just that outline. The outline, that this is the first cut, and I thank people for giving me some input over the last few days in terms of what we need to do to add content here and to modify. And this is, as I said again, it's a living document. I'd like everybody to feel they are now able to partake and change, add, modify, question what is in the strategic plan. If you remember, the original goal was to have the strategic plan for the NPO by a specific date for particular contractual and grant reasons. So now that pressure's over. This is our first attempt at doing that in a large effort to get there. Now it's a question of now let's make it open, and so I'm quite happy to lead the next version, of which it will morph from the current view that you can see on the original document. It'll go into the IDESG template. That's one thing I didn't do, so I'll put it onto the right document template coming through the next version. So this is really the structure. In here, the first 4 sections in the document very small sections, but just let's revisit that. The scope is between now and the end of next year, but obviously looking a little further as we need to. The vision and mission of the IDESG mission and vision statements, slightly modified, I might add. We've had some good feedback there. Situational analysis, again, that was really looking at the current strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. We can always improve those and look at how we need to address those. We don't just do a SWOT analysis and write them down. You look at what we can do to address those. So this is a working document. It's a reference document. It should cover a lot of things. This is one of the things we need to address, which is how we can improve and work out how we can get more members, more involvement, more relevance, more adoption, et cetera, in the SWOT analysis helps us understand some of our shortcomings and so forth. So let me whip through the strategic objectives. I think they were fairly straightforward. I'm going to come back to section 7 again, which is the large section which, if you remember, Adam took the ownership of doing a lot of the construction and pulling together of that. And this is a section which defines a lot of the deliverables, a lot of the activities, working groups, committees, outputs, their timelines, putting all of their effort into coming up with the deliverables that we need to promote the IDESG functions, etc. So other sections cover the administrative side, what resources we need, funding we need, etc., etc. So a strategic plan, again, is all-encompassing. And down, as you drill down into here, you'll find the IDEF development plan, the building blocks and the areas of focus. And again, reference the Appendix A, which has a list of many of the items from the committees, etc., that are coming up with various things by certain dates. I'll address one issue that I've had feedback on, which is some confusion in the user experience group around one of the items in the strategic plan to do with a usability impact assessment. So it's my term, I invented it, coined the phrase if you like. Everybody's going, what on earth is that? So in talking with Mary Hodder the last couple of weeks, the user experience group was feeling like they were not being able to be kind of mainstreaming. It's kind of a sidebar activity. How could this be looped into the main activities of IDESG and so on, rather than just being some documents in a library and some guidance and so on? So what I was suggesting there in terms of a usability impact assessment was a document or a question sheet, much like a privacy impact assessment, if people are familiar with that. A privacy impact assessment asks a series of questions for people to answer about how they've done privacy and built privacy into their process. So I was considering, well, let's consider a usability impact assessment. As people go for Trustmark certifications, etc., they can take a look at this question sheet and address each of those questions and answer them. How have they adopted the usability experiences guidance in terms of their implementation? So it would be in the form of a series of questions and therefore answers for people to show that they're not just pushing their own stuff, they are considering what the usability experience group has recommended as part of their work items. So that was the intent of the usability impact assessment. So I hope that's clear. So it's something that I was, as I said, talking with Mary about, and it kind of made it through to the strategic plan as part of the output of that group. So it doesn't have to stay there. It can be taken out, it can be modified, but really it's just to try to wait a hook to get the usability folks to see that their work would be referenced, and that people would have to answer how they've adopted and put in those principles and guidance into their implementation products. So that's that one. Really the structure here, let me whip through this, that would be good to stay on that slide. In section 7, The IDEF development plan is one item of the Section 7. Then you have the functional model. You have the risk assessment framework. Each of these are separate deliverables as work items with ownership in the committees. So they are components of what we're doing, and therefore they're referenced in the strategic plan as deliverables that we're going to do in terms of IDESG functions. So plan, umbrella, document, strategic plan is the umbrella. Here is where the rubber meets the road in terms of the output and the deliverables and how we're trying to put them all together in a plan to show that they're all coming out and how they ultimately will interact and provide value into the final IDESG implementations, trust mark programs, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope that clarifies it. Certainly, please feel free either online or in here to ask questions at all on any of this at any time during this morning. This is our time to kind of just rehash and rethink and make sure everybody's clear. The strategic plan is a much broader document than any one of these particular deliverables that's coming out. Not that it's any difference in priority, it's just a way of us putting everything in one place for us to reference, this is what's going on, this is the deliverables, this is the reason they're coming for output from these committees. But obviously we also include other areas, the financial sustaining plan, we've gone through that, how the challenges are facing us in terms of the migration from government funding to self-sustaining funding, how we're going to generate income. We're always open to creative ideas for that in terms of generating income for the organization. How we're going to look at our stakeholders, relying parties, etc., how we're going to bring these in to the organization and be participant to this. Interesting discussion in one of the groups, I think it was the international group this week, where we have IDAS, European identity, I guess, specification for electronic IDs. They have a lot of initiative in Europe, a lot of money, and looking at how individual countries will implement electronic IDs and how they're going to use those. Key point in talking with those folks when I met them in Europe was they have these EIDs, these national IDs or electronic IDs, and they want to use them online as they're a trusted identity. But the most of the relying parties that they want to use are based in the United States. So we have the Europeans that want to use their EID to log into the Googles and Microsofts and Amazons or whatever they're going to be using, and those relying parties are sitting here in the US. So there's a great bridge that we can try and build between IDAS and relying parties in the United States by showing how IDESG can insert ourselves and show that this is the way, by using these principles and everything we're doing, this is how the relying party can use our solution in terms of the structure that we're proposing and incorporate the adoption of electronic IDs from Europeans. So there's a way of getting some motivation, and there's a use case in terms of here's a use case that we need to solve. We've got lots of people with EIDs coming in Europe. They want to use US relying parties. The US, we're here to promote the NSTIC principles, etc. And here is an idea that we can now get inserted to help build that bridge. So for me, there's a great use case that we can really adopt in terms of what we're about. Looking beyond growth plan, the structure, I think Peter Brown has ideas on the structure changes that he wants to propose, rules of association, etc. Those will be communicated and worked through. But we have to evolve and adapt according to the needs of our organization. So there's lots of things we need to do here in bringing in resources, engaging folks to communicate, to market, etc., etc. So again, Appendix A is the collection of all of the work item deliverables from the committee. So it's a condensed view of Section 7, all of the work items and deliverables coming out of the committee. So that's really the overview of the strategic plan. So if there's any confusion about this compared to any of the deliverables, the unique deliverables, I hope I've helped answer those this morning. But let's open up, questions. Jack.
So, Jack Seuss, so the one question I have is in approving the plan, if there is significant modification, say as we come back with large revisions, do those revisions have to be approved as a separate addendum for the plan, or are they automatically part of the plan?
I'm happy to work either way. I think we've met the original need, which is to satisfy the MPO's needs. So now it's up to us how we manage this document. I'd really like to take people's input in the form of edits, text that I can glue in, or take the Word document, change the sections or add the sections, send them to me. I'll incorporate them and push a new version out for people to look at. And then according to how we want to then vote on it or approve it, then I'm open to how we want to do that. And we can use the rules of the association to ensure that we're incorporating a democratic manner of adoption.
Good morning, Angela Ray. I have a couple questions/comments, much more on the administrative side and a couple on the strategic side. Administrative and operational, other revenue streams prior to getting a potential revenue stream from the trust marks. Thoughts along those lines, possibly advertising on the web page, service delivery, and I guess the biggest funder we have is the federal government, so SBIR, STTR funding. I think that would be, even Department of Commerce has an SBIR program, so that's a small business innovative research and technology transfer. I think those would be ripe for picking for the IDESG. Also for many of the organizations that are in the room, this is a C3 organization, so your contributions to the organization are tax deductible, but also to consider in-kind contributions from your organization, possibly even plugs on your web page and redirects to the IDESG web page. So that's my financial side putting on the table. Strategic issues with the document. The document foresees this entity that succeeds, and part of me wants to, a strategic document also addresses what failure looks like. And we're not doing that at all. And I don't know if it's purposeful, but it's to use, at least from my perspective, to use as a gauge of where we are in 3 years. If this document is not materially revised, how do we gauge in 3 years where we thought we are today? And the last thought was, and this is whether or not we want to address it. We are addressing IDs of people. Do we ever want to get into the realm of non-person entities and remote IDs for vehicles? I'm thinking in agriculture. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Good ideas on the financial side. We'll certainly take those inputs. Regarding the measure of how well we're doing in terms of a strategic plan, that's why the strategic plan has ownership, work items and deliverable dates. And if we fail to meet those dates, we can see that we've failed to achieve that project plan in terms of this item needs to be done by that date, etc. So try to put in a project planning approach, and certainly in the table form. It has the vision of this deliverable, this date, and why, and who. So in 18 months' time, we can measure that and see that we're doing it. Maybe in 6 months' time, we're going to need to revise it anyway, because the 6 months of deliverables that we're doing now till the end of the year will be hopefully completed. So we'll then have some more, and we'll take it at the plan out another 6 months, a year, etc. So for me, this is, I don't tend to live in thinking of the worst case. I tend to looking at the positive, that we need to succeed. The SWOT analysis does, in the plan, start to cover some of our weaknesses, our threats, By no means is it complete, and I'd be happy to have people's input to expand that, because those are the things that we need to come up with a plan to address. Otherwise, that could lead us to failure and issues, etc. So from that perspective, I think the plan is looking at an 18-month view. It has ownership, it has timelines, it has deliverables. I hope we can achieve them, and maybe some will be early, some will be late, but that's how I'm going to measure what we're doing in terms of how we're achieving against those deliverables, because that's part of the mission that we're trying to achieve. And I've forgotten the last point you made. Sorry. But anyway, that's my main response to your questions. Let's come back to our next question then, please.
Good morning,
Jamie.
Neville. Jamie Clark from Oasis. And again, thanks for all the intense work on this in a very compressed period of time. By the way, I completely agree. The metric, the how are we doing and are we getting there, once the plan is approved and validated, will be whether all the pieces are coming together on schedule and in time to fulfill each other's dependencies. And you also had some metrics for growth of the organization for self-sustaining. You've set revenue targets. So I think you got everything you need to measure, until we find that we have, revised those goals. Speaking of that, there is a dashboard on the website now. There's some other lists of things. There'll be some things coming out of the meetings this week. This is Appendix A, which could be arguably the same thing or a different thing or related thing. And I'm just trying to figure out how to sort of integrate all those different efforts to create lists and keep track of everything into one place. So Appendix A would have to be living, wouldn't it? I mean, it would basically have to be the dashboard.
Exactly. Appendix A is our attempt to collect everything together so we can have a quick review and a quick point of reference. Here's everything going. Absolutely, it needs to be updated. A deliverable will be achieved, therefore it's concluded. Another one will be invented that we need to add. So yes, it definitely.
It's possible that in the course of putting together your framework management plan, you will receive some other advice about what should be in that and in what form, and whether it really should be Appendix A to a static document or not. I'm not so sure about strategic plan as a thing that gets approved from time to time with piece that is actually continually dynamic. So for what it's worth.
Yeah, this is needed to be a point in time snap this week. We've got something. Tick the box. We've achieved the needs for the NPO. Now we can adjust how we manage this. If we update the strategic plan too often, it becomes maybe too confusing. But Appendix A is a snapshot at this point in time. If there's a better dashboard that we can use, that can be the live part, and we can slide that into the plan when we make a new plan release. Either way, I'm quite happy.
Since you're still taking comments on all this stuff, we can develop this over time. But where I'm trying to go is that you have a strategic plan, which the first time I heard it on Wednesday is actually most about operational goals, not about the deliverables. You have the framework, the IDF, the next thing on the agenda today, which was presented separately and summarized in Ian's slides, which is very much about the deliverables and is something of a filter for them. And so as we populate all this stuff out and write it, we're going to be forced to create a hierarchical relationship or an understanding of which bits live in which bits. And as this is changing, I'm starting to see them overlap more. So that may yet still need to be sorted out.
That's fine. Overlap is always a nice challenge. The strategic plan is here not just for the framework plan. This is way more. It's the administrative side as well.
But you don't see the plenary or management council or board or whoever having to change the strategic plan in order to change the deliverables, right?
No.
That's where I was going.
No.
And there should be overlap between the strategic plan and other things, because the strategic plan is the overarching item. And so if we don't make reference to some of the other things, then the strategic plan doesn't serve as the arch.
But they'd be looking for all the changing details down at another level.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
so as things work and evolve, they're evolving further down, but the strategic plan just made a reference to everything. And we couldn't reference the dashboard as it was because it didn't represent all the deliverables that were being worked on by the committees.
So if somebody's doing something within an organization that is substantive and is not directly under the IDEF, it's not one of those priority projects, it would still show up as an activity that this takes into account. Okay.
Yeah, we would need to put it in. We've tried to keep the strategic plan at a fairly high level purposely, because there are other areas that are going and drilling down into a lot more detail. So If there is something that needs to be added, we can find the right space
Thanks.
and add it in. No problem, Jamie. Andrew.
Hey, Neville. Andrew Hughes. I was just browsing the section 9 on the structure.
Okay.
Where it lists the management council, plenary members, that sort of thing, roles and responsibilities.
Yes.
I know Peter's got that section to manage, I think. It's probably just an observation that the table listing the entities within IDSG and the responsibilities doesn't quite line up with the operational, like the operations activities.
Okay.
And some of the other activities in the other sections. Just very specifically, in the table, there's actually no one doing program operations.
Okay.
It just, small oversight, but it's an alignment thing, I think.
Perfect. As I said, happy to take revisions. This is quality input. Send me what you believe needs to be done. So thank you for telling me, but
Yeah.
you know, if you can commit to words, then I will happily adapt accordingly. This was a snapshot gathering information from many areas, so it's not perfect, as I said at the very beginning, on Wednesday. But yeah, I absolutely. Let's add the ownership and the role.
Yeah. And do you know if there's like a distinct separation between the plenary as building deliverables and plans and tools and methodologies versus an operational side of the organization, where an entity running the approval program, for example? Like, are we considering the two sides of an organization, or is it all plenary doing all?
These are some of the things we need to work out. We're all adjusting as we find we've got new items that we need to produce. How we take responsibility and ownership. The plenary is the body that is guiding everything we're doing. There are clearly management boards, management councils, committees that are all providing their particular role. When we set up the trust framework area, we've got to decide what's in it, how it's working, who's taking the ownership. So I'm sure the plenary has got a very large part of deciding how that's going to happen. The board makes its decisions for hiring executive directors and working with the grant program to get the money on very specific items. But here, when we're talking about something which is the core deliverable and purpose, then yeah, plenary absolutely should be involved. So really happy to work with everybody. I'm a plenary member as well, so let's work out what makes sense for our organization. We'll adapt as we move forward. Okay. Any comments online, or I'm sure Adam's itching to pitch in, maybe? Any other comments? Kim? No?
I was just going to say, at this time, there aren't any comments that have come in or forwarded to me, at least.
Okay. So I think if that's the case, then as I said, I'll wrap up with just please send me modifications. I'm not really interested in comments in terms of I don't believe this is true, or this should be discussed over there in the plenary. Those are not going to be helpful to me in edits. I'm looking for editorial input. So that may be new text, new sections, or people getting hold of the Word document there and just rewriting it to what they believe is appropriate. Send me the editorial type comments. If you've got structural comments, happy to have those. But I'm not here to debate necessarily the individual issues as they stand. I'm here to kind of capture the plan and put in the next version on the new template with that input. So if we can get those put in, that would be very, very helpful in terms of the next couple of weeks. So, Ian?
Neville, I'm sorry, Ian Glitzer. Just one thing that occurs to me is, do we have any formal representation in the plan on the plan's life cycle?
Section 4 scope, this is 18 months.
Okay.
And also it talks about it should be revised annually,
Okay, I just want to make sure that
at least annually.
that was represented at least to some capacity.
Yep,
Great.
section 4. Very brief. But that, it says it should be looked at annually, but we can do it whenever. As I said to Jamie on Wednesday, against one of his questions, I need to probably do a fix-up version, put it on the right template and get plenary input, and then we can put that out for review again in the next few weeks. So very happy to support immediate feedback for a fix-up version to satisfy the great input we're getting here. So it's on you guys to send me copy to edit. So thank you. Look forward to getting the next version moving. All righty.
So thanks for all your comments and helping us kind of revisit that. But I was trying to make that distinction between the strategic plan and the framework development plan.